listeners, and welcome to High Tea Mystique with your hosts, Kat.
And I'm Tess.
And Pam.
In a world changing faster than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea,
High Tea Mystique reminds you that no experience is too big or too small to teach us something about ourselves. So join us for a cup of tea as we steep into adulting, womanhood, independence, and more.
Tess, you were saying that your
goddess a tar.
Three of Swords is quite unique in the way that it came to you.
Yes. It was a New Year's read that Pam and I did in January 2020, literally at midnight. It was midnight. We were spending New Year's together.
Who needs a New Year's kiss?
Yeah, we did New Year's tarot read.
Show me the cards.
Baby.
Kiss with magic.
That's right. Yeah, a magic kiss.
It was midnight, and then right after that, we did our hurrahs with her family, and then we're like, all right, we're gonna do a tarot read.
Yeah.
So we
Closes
came
door.
Went off
Literally.
the balcony,
Lowers
lit
the
up the
lights.
candles,
yeah.
put on the incense, light up the sage.
That literally, yeah, that's what we did. and she and I both had decks, so we did it to ourselves. We were doing the reading to ourselves, like we weren't doing a reading for each other.
Two pros in a room.
And we kind of decided that we were going to do something of like lesson intention. So like a 3 pull, but we're gonna take. So technically, we pulled 6 cards, and each kind of formation was its own reading. So lesson first, intention second, lesson first, intention second, lesson first, intention second. And we took it as like, these are the lessons we're bringing into 2024. So my first formation came out, and I told Pam, like, I was like, I'm crying right now. And she looked at it and she was like, okay. And it just like, it immediately made me start crying. And it was the 3 of Swords for lesson and the 8 of Wands for intention. So my 3 of Swords was, as we all know, the kind of card that represented, heartache, betrayal, pain, basically from someone else's actions. And the 8 of Wands on top of it for intention. What in the 8 of Wands is like, it's a card of action, right? It's a card of, kind of moving on, motivation. That's why the 8 of Wands, like that formation, it always kind of looks upright, as if the wands are moving up.
Yeah, like think of a row of arrows like flying through the air.
Exactly, but they're wands, right? So, which is funny because they have no direction but just upright, right? And that's pretty much sums up 2023 for me.
Well, I remember you were
Yeah.
freaking out because you thought, does this mean there's another one coming? And I was like, well, hold on a sec.
Yeah, of course. My mind was like, am I gonna get prepared now? But yeah, I just started crying, and I swore to Pam right then and there. I was like, I'm gonna tattoo this on my body.
After we talked about it.
And I did.
Yeah.
I did. It was like, that was January 1st.
And here it is.
Her first tattoo ever.
Yeah, on my arm. On my arm.
That's such a good one. Wow, it's in the
Yeah.
same spot as my first tattoo ever, that even the viewers watching us online can't see. Because I'm wearing a long sleeve sweater.
On
Yeah.
the left,
But we have it in the same spot.
bicep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The placement was kind of motivated by my therapist because, when we first started seeing each other in 2023, I was, having a lot of really violent reactions when we were in our sessions. And she would tell me, like, whenever you really feel like you're losing control over like how you're feeling, or when you're in the session, I just want you to raise your arm, like put your arms above your head and place your palms on the center of your head. And then just breathe. Just, breathe, inhale with 3, exhale with 3, and just stabilize, tell yourself to like find your senses. What do you feel? What do you smell? What do you see? Things rooting like that. And I was like, yeah, So I'm gonna raise my arm when I'm freaking out and look at my tattoo right there, and remind myself of
Do not self-attack.
yeah,
Mhm.
and remind myself that pain and things that caused by others are not always um the definition and like the end all for me. The Eight of Wands is slowly thereafter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. What a way to start the conversation. And with that, an official welcome to everybody joining us for this episode of High Tea Mystique. We're so happy to have you here with us. And we have officially entered the season of giving back, giving, receiving, spending more intentional time around those who we know our lives would not be the same without. And and then, of course, some of the holiday blues too that come along with that, as we have already discussed in previous topics pretty recently. We hope that you enjoyed our last episode as we closed off spooky season with our interview with a lichen. And thank you for the feedback on it. We're glad that we were able to have some spooky conversations with everybody, uh, and and hope to hear about some of you purchasing uh, their book and letting us know what you think of it and letting them know what you think of it too, because I'm
Mhm.
sure all feedback is good feedback. But of course, let us know if you love it. And so, without further ado, to kick off the official season of giving, we have a really fun topic for today. And it is something that we have spoken of before. We've sprinkled about it. We actually realized today, in looking back, that we've talked about this since the very first episode. And so it's kind of cool that we finally are dedicating an entire episode to talking about love languages. I think that in the spirit of giving, this is such an opportune time to not only like maybe you already know what love languages are. You've heard about them, but just like with any ideology, some things get rusty in our minds and in our practice in the daily. And so reminding yourself this at this time is a great opportunity, because I think that with the season of the holidays and just naturally wanting to purchase gifts or create gifts or offer gifts to people, it's nice to take a step back too and ask what are the best types, right? Of ways to show love and connection and care for the people in our lives that we feel that for. And so the idea is to kind of break these things down a little bit and give our own insights on what and why there are certain love languages that we attach ourselves to from both ends, and just have a really nice discussion about it today. So, to pair with that, we have a tea blend. You know that we've been vibing with our different blends of teas. So, we have four completely fresh, like not fresh, but like freshly separated ingredients that Pam and I kind of concocted together to pair with this episode. The base of this tea is actually a sencha green tea. So it's a very, very traditional tea. And that was in the spirit of the season. I think that with the holidays comes a lot of tradition, comes a lot of ritual, and comes a lot of coming back to, right? Going back to basics. So we wanted to put just something really nice, and there's a lot of beauty and simplicity. And so a nice base to center around our tea. We also added jasmine flowers, which is a fan favorite of the entire
Oh
hosting
yeah.
station of High Tea Mystique, and naturally built to soothe and relax, along with lemon balm, which is also a good digestive piece as well. And then the fourth ingredient that we added, full disclaimer, is rooibos, because, well, one, I'm on my period. And so I needed something a little bit more medicinal for me today. And it was Pam who thought of adding it in when she so graciously pulled out like an entire bag of it, which is so nice. I was like, yes, I need that. Please throw that in there. And again, friends, like that's just the magic of tea. You can add different things. You know how it'll affect the flavor now, I hope. Right. So, like adding the rooibos gives it this really vegetal taste, pretty robust. So, to be honest, although this tea has the jasmine and lemon balm, I'm actually tasting more of the sencha and the rooibos in it. It tastes very, very vegetal, but we're still getting the benefits, which is pretty cool. So it's like a nice full body tea that you can have probably any time that the sun is out, I would say, because it is going to give you some energy. And that's what we're going to need for this topic because I think it's going to be a fun one today. Pretty light and reflective. So, since it is more of discussion based, we encourage, like, as you're listening to what we're sharing, to really see yourself here in the room with us, and ask yourself any questions that are inspired by what we're talking about. So, we're going to dive in. And
Ready.
the way that we're going to do this is we're going to go ahead and dissect each of the love languages. Not too much. We don't want to overdo it, right? Because as we said, we know that this is a reiteration for some of our listeners. But we want to give you a good understanding of the fact that there are 5 different love languages. And then we're going to take it from the approach of what we feel moved to offer to others. And then what we've noticed are love languages that feel very special when they are done unto us. All right, but we're going to start by kind of picking them each apart. And I'm going to go ahead and begin with the first love language in no particular order, which is words of affirmation. And so, words of affirmation, as described here, is communicating affection through spoken and written praise, appreciation, encouragement. There's an example here of giving frequent I love yous, right? So, words of affirmation is for the person who is, I mean, right? Like the storyteller, the person who potentially loves to write, the person who is amazing with their words, the one who wants to give the speech, like at those important events in life, the person who always just knows what to say, right? Chances are that for that person, a natural love language that just comes easy and from the heart and just ever flows is words of affirmation. They know how to look at someone that they care about or even a stranger at times and be able to see into their soul and say exactly what they need to hear in that moment. And I think in beginning this conversation is to recognize that love languages are gifts. They're not things that we can just pick and choose. They are, I would say, callings, right? Things that we naturally gravitate towards, which is why it's important to understand what those are to you because you manifested them. They aren't just something that you can take a look at a list at and say, this is me, this is what I want. It has to be what you are because I think as we discuss it today, especially when we give our own approaches, you'll understand a little bit more behind that. But yeah, the words of affirmation, and I think examples of words of affirmation too, aside from frequent I love yous, are just things like you have no idea the energy that you have and the way that you can transform a room when you walk in, is like the types of statements that words of affirmation can carry, or meeting somebody on their worst day and being able to speak through them, right? And being able to speak into them because there are many ways that people handle grief, and some people need to talk it out and some people need to be encouraged and lifted up. And that's where the person whose love language is words of affirmation can really be an aid. And I think that's all I'll say on that one. And we're going to go over to Tess for the next love language.
Which is quality time. Would you like me to? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll give a definition here just to keep it kind of foundational and then expand. Quality time is really expressing love by fully focusing attention on your partner through shared activities, conversation, and togetherness. I think quality time is a really intentional love language. I think it's something that you do have to give it more thought because I feel a little bit like sometimes love languages are instinctual, right? Like this is what you'll do on an everyday basis, where sometimes this is where quality of time differs because it's not so much just being at home together and doing chores and this and that, but really giving your partner, your friend, your whoever loved one a moment to just be together, experience something new together, maybe, or just have that talk of like, let's slow down together, right? And give each other attention and to see each other really and not just let things pass by and let the chores, um, you know, be done and that's it, we're going to go to bed, right? I think quality time is also, funny enough, making meaningful things out of the mundane, right? Like, yeah, we're gonna go grocery shopping together, but we're not just gonna like, okay, go our separate ways and meet up at the cash register, right? We're gonna we're gonna go through this experience together, right? And it'll be worth something because of, the energy and the attentiveness and the little spontaneity that you can find, in a fun like chips and cracker aisle. I don't know, right? I think that's the playfulness of quality of time, but also the kind of possibilities that happens when your love language is quality of time.
Yes. And a great one too to follow the words of affirmation, because I think if we were to give that same scenario, right, of comforting a friend in some sort of stage of grief, uh that's a huge difference, right, between the friend who offers words of affirmation as opposed to the friend who offers quality time, because the friend who offers quality time may understand the benefit of sitting in silence, and allowing somebody to feel all of the feels without words to express them. So all of them can be equally powerful. And another one, really, really, uh, I don't necessarily, I think they're all quite popular, but the next one is physical touch. So I think this is one that people oftentimes think of when it comes to love languages. So physical touch is expressed as showing care through intimate and affectionate physical contact, like hugging, kissing, and sex. So there are definitely a good number of people on the planet, who identify with physical touch as one of, if not their most common love language. They need to be reassured, right, physically of a person's place in their life, So these are the friends who need to make sure that they go in and hug everybody in the room. Otherwise, they haven't properly said hello and acknowledged that they're there. A wave simply won't do, to the person who, um, regardless of how long they've been with their partner, be it after the first date or after 10 years, you wouldn't know the difference, right? Because their levels of physical affection are the same, right? They need to have that unique handhold. They need to have that signature embrace with their partner, that kind of like keeps that spark going for them. And it's a really beautiful and very, very powerful love language because there's a lot within the chemistry of physical touch. And yeah, it's a really, really powerful one for those who do have it as one of their primary love languages. And I'm going to have Pam talk about the next one.
Yes, as a Capricorn, I had to do acts of service. So, the foundational definition we have here is doing thoughtful deeds and gestures to help make your partner's life easier by relieving burdens. So, I feel like one of the comments that I wanted to make just on all of these, they're all a little bit different, but they're all the same in the sense of you have to be intentional about it, right? Like what when Tess said that earlier, that I think that hit the nail on the head. It's not just about, especially with acts of service, right? Like, oh, but I did this the other day, or I did that, or you're always telling me to do something. I think acts of service as a love language can be really misconstrued into people thinking that somebody's just bossy. Um, but I think the key word that I was going to mention, in case the definition didn't include it there, was doing small things that helps alleviate everyday burdens, right? So if you know that your loved one is constantly doing things, right? Like if this is their love language, they're probably the one in the room who's getting up or showing people that they love them by just doing simple tasks that would make their day easier, right? That they don't have to worry about this anymore because somebody already finished this. That is the distinction, even with like the quality time, right? The difference from, oh, but I spend all this time together, or like, we live together, right? What do you mean that we don't spend enough quality time? Or I'm always doing stuff. What do you mean that I'm not doing things for you? It doesn't matter if it's not perceived in the way that the person is looking for, because it's very different for someone to have to ask you to spend time with them, or to tell them, for you to say that you love them, or to tell them like, let me hold your hand," versus somebody who is intentional and does all of these things without the person having to ask for it. Especially, in my opinion, acts of service, because it's one of those love languages that I believe requires a lot of attention to detail to understand what tasks would help this person be less stressed out, right? Make their day a lot easier. So you have to kind of pay attention to what are the things that they're saying, what are the things that you always seen them do for other people. Like that's most likely the kinds of ways that they're looking for someone to help alleviate their plate. Um and I feel like usually the people who have this are people who tend to be really busy or who tend to take on more than what they can handle. And so when they see somebody who takes that extra step to be very thoughtful in how can I make their day easier today, it sits with them. You know, like I also think that's pretty powerful along with physical touch and all these other ones. They all have their own special power. Um, but I think that's a really important distinction to make for acts of service. You know, if you're thinking about somebody in the back of your mind and you're thinking, why are they always complaining when I'm doing so many things? You know, just fix the focus a little bit and maybe understand what you're doing. Are you actually doing it for them, or are you doing them to get them off your back? Are you doing it for um selfish reasons, right? Or are you doing it to genuinely help them? And part of that I feel also helps their mental load, because if they don't have to think about it and you're doing it for them, that's a huge relief, you know. And as somebody whose main love language is acts of service, like that's what I'm looking at, right? That's the impact that I feel is when know somebody is giving me this kind of love language, the relief that I feel mentally of like, oh my God, I don't have to worry about that. Thank you so much. You know, to me is like the most helpful thing. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great addition too to mention, especially now, kind of like in our intro, of how it's it's great to use love languages as tools to understand other people,
Mm-hmm.
because the way that somebody interprets, right? So being able to have an honest conversation because you, Pam, know your love languages, right? Or you at least know your dominant love language. And so you know how to communicate to that to the people that you love or to the people who want to be in your life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
who you want to explore and see if you connect with each other. So then when somebody is aware of what your love languages are, but maybe for them they struggle, being able to embody that love language for themselves, it's one of those things where now you're at this crossroads, right, where you have to make the choice as a person, right, to potentially have to put in more effort or recognize that everybody is on a different wavelength and frequency, and that this could be the difference, between your relationship being an acquaintance and a friendship, or a friendship and like family,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's a cool thing to recognize, because then it helps you to not take things as personally and realize that your communication and your affection styles are different,
Right.
and it's a level of maturity for
And
sure.
to also not take certain things for granted, because once you understand that that person is showing their love to you just in the way that they believe is the best, because maybe they haven't learned to have that conversation of love languages, um you start being a little bit more appreciative of it, you know, and then you can open the door to having that conversation with your loved one about how is the best way I can show you that I love you, and the best way that you can show me that I love you. And that way we don't
Mhm.
have any misunderstandings.
Yeah. Yeah, meeting them in the middle because they ultimately are doing it because they care.
Mm-hmm.
And the last love language on our list of 5 is receiving gifts. So, giving meaningful surprises and symbolic presents to celebrate affection. And I think that this is one that everybody has experience with, because I think that it's a part of the society that we live in, right? We have a big stigma around the idea of gift giving. And of course, now talking about the holiday season, right? It's something that is inescapable the moment that Halloween has passed. Honestly, before, if you were going into certain like retail stores, right? Like it's been
Or if you
around.
have a lot of Libras in your life.
That too. The season of giving does start earlier for Pam. Love you, Pam. And so So yeah, so gift giving and receiving, right, as a love language is being able to know a person so well and know what makes them tick, that you know what also makes them giddy and what is going to put a smile on their face, right? And that not only that you know that, but that you seek that, right? That is what ignites you and gives you joy when you want to express love for another person, right? It's through little tokens like that. My grandmother was excellent with giving gifts, right? Especially during the holidays. And I've talked about this before, how she would do simple things like making a pot of pistachios to give to any and everybody that ever did anything in her life, right? Albeit from the people that she would see on her daily errands to the mail person to her beautician to the person who tinted her eyebrows, you know? And so uh, for her, right, I learned through her what that love language looks like and is best embodied as. And so for me, when I take this knowledge of I've been giving gifts my whole life, I've been receiving gifts my whole life, it helps me to better ask the question of, is receiving gifts really a love language that I naturally gravitate towards, or is it something that I've learned how to do and what it looks like? And it's a good question to ask yourself, because we live in a capitalist society and there's a difference between gifts, because we have this stigma that gifts have to have a dollar sign,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and there are so many ways to gift something to somebody that has value. You know, value very, very rarely has a dollar sign, especially the true ones in life. So, without further ado, from this point on, we're going to kind of just very open forum talk about how we like to give love and show love and how we feel, which is probably the most awkward question to ask people, regardless of your level and stage in life. I don't know, maybe 20 years from now, this will be a lot easier to talk about. But what are our dominant ways of receiving love from others, you know, that we maybe not even be fully comfortable or realized, but know we want. You know, I think that's a level of discussion too for today. So I think I'm going to start with Pam as we dive into this, because she kind of already was excited about the conversation. And we already know that acts of service as a Capricorn, yes, but also unique to Pam, is something that I think Tess and I can say that as great friends of hers, we see this firsthand. And so, you know, Pam, if you want to embellish a little bit more on acts of service, and we're talking about love languages that we like to give right now. And then if you want to let us know if there's any other love language that also stands out for you in ways that you like to show affection to the people that you love.
I feel like the main one is definitely acts of service. Take a real quick. Um, and then maybe a tie for second in terms of like giving to other people that is not my partner. Um, is gift giving slash quality time, because to me, I think Tess mentioned that they're kind of like, they feel like two sides of the same coin, you know, because for all of these gift giving, acts of service, and quality time, what ties them in together to me is the thoughtfulness of it, right? Like how long it must have taken somebody to sit down and actually think about a gift that I would thoroughly enjoy, right? And a lot of the times the best gifts, as we've mentioned, are not ones that are the most expensive, but the ones that really show the person, like, wow, they actually are paying attention to what I've been saying. They've paid attention to my interests, my hobbies. They've paid attention to maybe some things have been stressing me out, and they thought, you know, like, oh, this might help relieve some of that stress. Same thing with the quality time, right? Like, it takes a lot. If you want a good quality time, I guess, event gift, the best ones will be right when it's very thought out and well thought out. So, like if you know somebody in your life who's like a cinephile, they love movies, or there's a movie that they've been talking about, and you imagine like you planned a whole movie date with them, And how excited would they be to know that you've thought of everything, you've bought the tickets for the movie that they've been wanting to see and have been talking about for the longest time, and then you already made reservations to go and eat somewhere afterwards to talk about the movie, and then you kind of get to be together in that moment, spending all of that time together, enjoying the movie, talking about the film. It takes a lot of thought, like to really think about it. And the same thing for gift giving, like for me those are kind of two in the same. um and they almost fall under the umbrella for acts of service for me, because the quality time more than gift giving, but it's because I'm doing something for you, and it could be also small things, right? Like it doesn't have to be a whole thing like a movie, but even if it's like a quick, like, let's get some coffee and catch up. Maybe at like when I go there, like I'll bring something up, or I'll bring a little gift that I've thought about that I bought when I was out or something. Um and so all of those, I feel the overarching and like most important takeaway is that I've taken the time, right, to think about how will this best impact this person, right? Like, is this something that I feel they're not really gonna need, because I also acknowledge that as somebody who enjoys giving gifts and seeing people have a good time, that's also a huge reason for my acts of service. It's part of the reason why I also love being a host. It's because I love ensuring that everybody is having a great time, that everyone's like talks to each other, gets to know more people. I'm always the type of person who's like, the more the merrier. I always assume that people are better friends than what they are. And just I think that everybody's just best friends, and I want everybody to have a good time. But I acknowledge that a lot of the times, it might be too much, or if somebody else is hosting something. Like, I think a prime example is your Halloween party. I found myself in Test Knows, I found myself wanting to buy a lot of things for the party, like decorative, but then I was like, wait, I know that Kat doesn't have a lot of space in her house. Let me check to see if she genuinely would use this, if she genuinely wants this. Because as excited as I am to bring all of this stuff, I also know how frustrating it is to keep that stuff, right? Or like, people are always leaving things at parties, or like, will she have the space? So I'm like, okay. So that's why I think,
It was a
that.
great balance, by the way, just for everybody. Pam
Thank
brought the perfect additions for the closet.
So, but that takes a lot of thought, and I had to take that moment to step back and be like, well, hold up. And that's why I mentioned it earlier, right? Are you doing this for selfish reasons, or are you doing this to actually help the other person? Because I feel like, especially when I was just starting out, right, in my first relationship, I knew immediately acts of service, but I didn't truly understand how to communicate that with my partner. Um, and they also didn't understand, right, like how to meet me, but also how to, um how do I want to say this, I guess really just have that conversation, because maybe they just weren't aware of what their love languages were. They didn't really understand. And I think that the media makes love and partnership seem very simple, and it can be, but I've definitely learned that it's not that people are bad. It's just not a good match, you know? And I feel like love languages are the same. Just because you have a different love language from somebody else, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're both bad people. It just means you're not a good match for each other. And that doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. Like, I feel like I've had a lot of friends as well who've kind of gone through the same cycle. And as you get older, you just start learning, hopefully, that it's just a mismatch. It's nobody's fault, because I feel like it's very easy to put blame on others, especially when it comes to love languages. Like, how do you not know me? Like, of course, I always have to ask you to do things. But I don't think we're taught how to translate that, right? Like, why am I feeling so frustrated having to tell you to do things all the time? And why are you not understanding how that frustrates me so much? It's because I think people don't understand, like, this is how you show me that you love me, right? Because if I think back and reflect back on my first relationship, oh my God, it's like I would always be complaining, like, I don't know, a lot of the times, like, I have to have so much reassurance because you're not reassuring me in the ways that I'm looking for. And he would tell me all the time, what do you mean? I literally, when I was out, I thought about you and I was thinking about buying some, I don't know, cinnamon rolls and I want to share them with you. I'm like, okay, but I can't read your mind. Like, how do I see that? How are you showing me this? How does it show up in our relationship? And I've learned from that one and from other relationships how to be more clear about communicating what it is that I need. But that was a huge learning that I had to do, not just from me, but from him as well, right? Understanding that maybe acts of service is not the way that he thinks love should be shown. And that's okay. But that just means we're not meant for each other. We're not a good match. And so I'll find somebody who thinks that they either agree or can meet me. If they don't necessarily think that the acts of service is one for them, but they can at least do it for me to show me that they love me, then that'll work, you know. Um but yeah, I think I kind of went off. But this one is giving, right? Not receiving yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But yeah, I think definitely acts of service is the biggest one. I feel like you guys see it all the time, especially in my cooking and in gatherings and in just doing little things, for people. Um, Especially I feel like at work, or a lot of what I do, I feel shows up in the minuscule things, the little tiny things that I know can be annoying. Like if there's a huge party. I mean, I also acknowledge that this is like the Latino side of having being raised as a female in a Latino household, that you help clean up at the end of an event. But I also know how annoying it is to clean up after an event, and so I do it because I'm like, yeah, I'm sure this is a lot. If I can at least help them just a little bit, I'm sure they'll appreciate it. So that's probably why my acts of service come from that,
Yeah.
or my love language comes in acts of service, a huge part of it.
Yeah, the roots go very deep.
Yep.
And I was also going to say on the physical touch, I did forget to mention that as well, that culturally, physical touch can be a lot more powerful for others than, like, for some as opposed to others, because of the way that they're raised culturally. Because there are so many cultures where physical touch is ingrained into how they communicate with each other, and so it's natural for people to just be functioning with physical touch at the center, and for sure, I would say that Hispanic culture has a lot of that. Not every nation, but the majority. Did you want to add something too, Tess?
Yeah, I think something that has been kind of brewing in my mind is that sometimes, which is funny because Pam was saying that she didn't see too much overlap, but I was thinking about the overlap while she was talking. Um, because I mean, honestly, Pam, right? This question, because I feel like you'll see this, right? You'll feel it when there is something that you're stressed about, like coming home and having to do that one task, right? And you come home and your partner has a beautiful bouquet of roses for you, but the task still needs to get done. How much are you able to really enjoy those bouquet of flowers?
I think a perfect example was my surprise party. Remember when I was like, "Oh my god, I love this," but also I have so much homework.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then like
It was great though. It was great. I loved it. Thank you.
and
Yeah. No,
then
but it's a good one. It's a
yeah.
very good one.
And then the flip is sometimes that like gift is the service, right? Sometimes the gift is the task is done. You're home and the task is done and your partner's like, "Yeah, you know that thing, I don't know, the AC's broken. Yeah, I gotta fix it today. It's done. Hey, how are you?" Like, and then there's the relief, it's done. Like I feel like that in and of itself is sometimes like such a strong gift, which is what you were saying before. Sometimes it doesn't have a dollar value. And that's when you said that, I was like, "Oh, yes." Sometimes that gift is the service.
The gift
right?
of problem resolution, conflict
Mhm.
resolution.
Oh
all
my
of
god.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The gift
It's a
of
lot of brain power saved.
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't
And
need
at
the
our
bouquet of
age, our
roses.
brittle bones,
Right.
Use all the power saving I
You're
can
so funny.
get.
Brittle bones.
But yes, Tess, I would love to
Yeah.
hear from you. And again, two would be a wonderful number. But the primary love languages that really stand out for you.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to fix my headset first.
Apology not accepted.
All right. I'll just leave.
Spicy. Please don't
That's
leave.
not my love language.
We need you here. No way. I'm shocked.
um it's also funny because I feel like as everybody has kind of given the fundamental definition and expanded on it a bit, right? I feel like all love language is so intentional, and it's so funny because I was thinking to myself, my love language is probably like, especially from the giving end, is quality time, right? I really love spending time with, like everyone under the sun that I consider a loved one. I think it is what really feeds my soul, right? I also know that sometimes for me in giving, I don't think it's odd for me to say it, but there's a little like hesitation there where for giving love, right? Sometimes I kind of catch myself because of like what Pam was saying before too, like when she had to catch herself. I feel like my giving language can be gifting, but then sometimes I feel like it really backfires because I'm so like, there's a lot of trauma attached to gifting for me. And I say that and it sounds heavy, but really it's not. It's just there's a lot going in my mind when I'm gifting because I want to do it really wholeheartedly. I love doing it. I love gifting, right? But if someone tries to like gift me something, I always like feel there's this little thought in my mind where I'm like, oh God, like, especially when it's a dollar value item, I get really, really insecure. I get really like really loud about it in my head because that was my dad's love language, was gifting to a very unhealthy level. Like he did nothing else but spend money on people. And he did it to a point where it ended like, people that he was supposed to take care of as well, like on a very, fundamental basis, like be a dad, like, manage finances thing, that it kind of fucked us up. Right. So, he had girlfriends. He wanted to gift them things, right? One at a time, right? One girlfriend at a time. He wasn't a player like that. But, he had a girlfriend. He wanted to gift her things. And it was like, we as kids, we didn't think anything of it. But then, of course, we saw the gifting kind of lead to, okay, I can't pay for that thing. The power's out, the water's out, things would then happen. And then as kids, you kind of pick up the thing of like, okay, gifting now might mean we won't be able to have this later, right? Like a really important thing. So yeah, like that's why I hesitate to say, is gifting my love language? because of what you had said too, right? Like is it really from us or is it just what we've absorbed, right? When you said that about your grandmother, I started thinking about my dad and I was like, damn, is that my love language? So I wanted to say it truthfully and genuinely, but I'm saying it now with a little bit of doubt. And I hope it's not odd that I say it with doubt, but it is kind of like a spot of insecurity and heavy observation for me, because sometimes I know, because he probably felt this way, that none of the other things, if he did them for people, would matter as much, which I think is totally wrong, right? If he had spent quality time with me or with his girlfriend, that would have been as equally valuable as, like, I don't know, a jewelry from Pandora or something, right? But yeah, it's odd. It's odd that people
Well,
can kind of mix
but
it.
but that's, sorry to interrupt, but that's you saying that, considering that your love language is quality time. Who knows if the girlfriend would have agreed to that?
Yeah,
Mm.
which but I think he never really gave himself that shot. You know what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean?
absolutely.
He never really gave himself that shot to try it. He's like, no, this is the only thing I'm able to do, right?
Mhm.
Which of course, can also come from his culture because he was, Hispanic.
Mhm.
He was a man.
Provider
So,
mentality.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's definitely a culture there that's like all you should be doing is showing your wealth and your ability to provide, right? When actually that that type of characteristic is what kind of sabotages his ability to provide, unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
yeah. The giving part, for sure, 100%. I can confidently say quality time is one of them. My second one, I don't know. Gifting is there, but it's under observation right now. It's in probation, I should say.
I think you are the perfect person to go next, Tess, because I am also of the same mind of you of racking my brain. I feel like I have one love language that is evident and obvious, and I think that most of the people that I'm close with in my life would agree that I would say this. And then when I try to think of another one, I have one there. I just think it's very situational. I think it's something that I feel compelled to do, but it's the blatant difference between very close inner circle and everyone else. Like it's a love language I don't feel to do with most other people because I'm changing as a person. And so my like overarching love language is words of affirmation. I think that it's something that I've always wanted to be. I think that for a long time as a kid, I was really, really shy and I only really spoke with my best friends. But since I was so shy and quiet in class, it was like I couldn't stop running my mouth with my friends. And I think that one of the things that I found in that was giving a lot of advice, right? Was I supposed to? Was I wise enough to? Who knows, right? But I think through the trial and error over the years, I ended up finding a really good sense of purpose in being able to not necessarily give advice based on experience, but give advice based on how much I believed and cared about the people that I was talking to. So like just loving a person so much that it's like, I just have to tell you how incredible you are and how all of the things that you're afraid of, I can already see you doing and excelling at. And like feeling like when you see somebody that you love succeed and excel, it's because like my gratification and what I get from that is being like I get to be one of the people who believed in them before they did this, and being able to say that I spoke this truth uh to them on that day that they felt like they were about to give up, and that's one of the things that like really like ignites a spark in me with my relationships with my friends and people is just being able to say like I hope you know that I look at you as a superhero and I really think that you can do everything that you believe that you can, and you're a reminder of why I can too. And that's who I choose to surround myself with. And what I think is interesting is like I could surround myself with whoever, right? But I choose to believe more deeply than that and say that I am attracting the people that I need. And so, what else I wanted to say on words of affirmation um, is that I have also attracted people who seek that as their love language. And so, I think that's why my second love language is something that I cannot give to everybody because it's physical touch. And so I'm happy to give my love language of words of affirmation to anybody that I feel called to, like whether it be like a one on one conversation with uh, perhaps maybe somebody in the running community. And like being able to speak on them about like the process of getting started and what they're battling or struggling through. You could even take it into theater as well. I think that like exploring this new avenue of directing has been really good for that being a natural love language of mine of like offering feedback and how to shape somebody's version of their character, right? Without like, it's such a sensitive thing, like talking to actors about ultimately like making a modification or an adjustment. And I feel like I'm never afraid of that. I'm actually very excited, of like, how can I remind them of their power, while also staying true to my vision of the story because I have to have my own vision, like it's so, so important. And it's nice finding that balance. So just like a simple way that it comes into play. But I recognize that as we were talking, people love words of affirmation, like people, that is their jam. That is their love language that they love to receive. And because I can so freely give it, it doesn't take anything away from me, right? I can give it to as many people. Um, it affects my second love language, and I think that those who are really in my inner circle have a different understanding of who I am, right? And the way that I stand and present myself in a room where I'm really, really comfortable is different from how I would be in maybe a more public setting, right? Where I'm still able to be myself, but physical touch is not as present. And that's because physical touch was never as present. So this is really like in uncovering and relearning, who I am and why I am the way that I am, I realized that I had a lot of cultural repression around the idea of physical touch and the idea of displays of affection, And so for a long time, I closeted the way that I showed love, especially to partners, but also to like friends and best friends. I would save that stuff, like, to be quite honest, kind of like at sleepovers, of like girlhood and exploring girlhood and just being like sisters with girls. I really would just do that like at sleepovers and like outside of school, but I was a totally different person in school. And I would say that it really wasn't until college when I was studying at a conservatory and I was spending like 14 hours a day with the same people that I started to realize that I was not afraid of physical touch. I was afraid of what people might think of me if I showed that I enjoyed physical touch, And so that's why I say it's a big unlearning of what I had in my head of structure of what's supposed to be seen as okay. And so since I'm still learning it and it's something that brings me a lot of joy, I still grapple with that in public. That like I worry, like literally as simple as, should I go in for the hug? Like, would this person like that? Like still asking the question as opposed to trusting, like, well, this is how I show love. And if this person doesn't receive me this way, I hope that they're comfortable enough with me to let me know, or that maybe in doing it, I'll realize it's not, because my approach is so pure that it couldn't go wrong. Like trusting that more. Whereas words of affirmation, bro, I can I can tell you that you're gifted and blessed, like without giving it a second thought and I can walk away thinking like that person might think I'm crazy. But like I have to do it. It's who I am and I can't not do that, and I'm definitely a Libra in the sense of like small talk. I don't know her, like we just have to jump and get down and dirty and like you need to tell me about your demons and I'll tell you about my flaws and we'll be better people at the end of the day. And so for me, it's if I had to pick 2, I would say that it's those 2. Uh, but it's much more so words of affirmation at the center.
That's really funny because I feel like in hearing all of ours main love language, I can kind of see where the influence comes from, right? Like test quality time, to me it makes sense because she lost her mom at a young age, and so that, wanting to make sure that she spends time with the people that she loves is something that I see, with yours being words of affirmation. I feel like growing up, oh, I forgot what denomination,
Baptist Christian.
Baptist Christian, and knowing how, the relationship with your religion and how that affected your relationship with your mother. And I almost feel like not really being able to vocally speak up for yourself in a lot of those ways, right? And having to hold your voice back. It makes sense to me that now your main love language is words of affirmation, and you feel like, no, I have to make sure these people understand and that they have somebody who tells them, like, you can do this, or because you probably didn't have that. And then for mine too, acts of service, because when I look at it, I'm like, okay, I see it in my mom every single time that she hosts and she does all these things, but she does it alone. That my dad doesn't help her because it's that traditional Latino machismo mentality of like the men don't do those things, right? Cleaning the house or da da da. And so I see how that for me shows up as my foundational one. So I think it's just like a little interesting observation that I wanted to just mention. And then I totally feel you with the physical touch thing because I feel like I'm like that at work specifically. And I struggle a lot with the Latino slash Japanese cultural influences that I have, right? Because Latino influence, oh my God, yeah, even if it's work, hey, how are you? besitos, like let's get cafecito, whatever. Everybody hugs, you say hi to every single individual, right? And I'm used to that outside of work. But the Japanese part of me, it's like work, you are formal. Like I I don't feel comfortable sometimes giving even like a hug or like a kiss hello with people until I've had a little bit more interactions with them and almost building that sense of, and I don't want to say seniority, but that's the only way that I can explain it with the Japanese context,
Mhm.
where it's like I I don't know you, you don't know me. I don't know if I'm okay to give you physical touch to say hello. Even though that's something that I feel like I would like to do, but to me it also still feels weird of, but I should we be, but this is work. Like you like I don't know if this is okay, even though I work somewhere where it's like, oh my god, everybody would be like totally fine with it. But I get in my head about it,
Yeah.
and I think about how quite frequently actually um how like the both cultures of mine sort of work together but also counter each other,
Mhm.
you know um but one of the things that I did want to mention that I guess could also transition us into the receiving part is physical touch was something that I recently learned with some of my newer relationships that it was like a love language I would really want more of. I think that coming from a Japanese descendant household, physical touch and that type of affection was really only given to us when we were like children, right? And I mean like little children, like maybe after the age of 10 getting into the tweens. I think my parents assumed like, oh, they're going to be teenagers, they're not going to want like whatever anymore. um and even then, right, I think culturally, if you look it up, a lot of Japanese people are not very affectionate with their kids, especially the fathers and things like that. My own father didn't even see his dad smile or hear his laugh until he was like 20, I think, when some estranged aunts came in and visited and made him laugh. Um, and so physical touch was never a love language that I thought I even cared for. But more recently, I started developing an appreciation for it, right? Like understanding how physical connection, um, as simple as hand holding, right? As simple as just like somebody's hand, like fingers just like slightly rubbing your back or something like that, um, can bring people together even without having to say anything, right? In the same way that quality time can, like how you were saying, maybe somebody needs somebody to sit with them in the silence. Um, and it's something that I found myself wanting more of, especially with the partner that I have now. And I feel so grateful to have him. But it's also really interesting to see how, with through that relationship, right, which I would say is probably the most mature relationship that I've ever had. We've talked about everything and everything under the sun within the first maybe 2 months of talking to each other, you know. And when we brought up the topic of love languages, like I was very upfront. I was like, listen, you know, I had this relationship, did not go well, was went on for a really long time. I had this other relationship, I thought it was going well, things did not match. So I was very like, poor him. He had the rough side of me. I was like, I ain't
Lucky
taking
him.
shit. This is all that, like, these are all my cards on the table, and this is how I feel about love languages. How do you feel? And I remember when we were talking about it, he was kind of like, I mean, if you want me to choose, I guess I'll pick, but to me it's kind of like a blend of all of them. And it was so interesting to hear because I think internally I always felt that with a romantic partner, I wanted all love languages, but that was so hard to find that I just resulted into just picking the one that means the most to me, right? Which is access first. Like, if I can't get all of this, at least show me this one thing. And through him, I was able to find someone who kind of matched me in terms of what we thought, because I think for him also, one of the biggest ones is acts of service as well, along with quality time, especially because he's somebody that is a little bit more introverted. He doesn't go out as much. And so both of those things, even though shine a little bit brighter for the both of us, we still acknowledge that we want to show each other the way that we love each other through all the five languages, right? Like making sure that we're always saying I love you, or that we always say goodnight to each other, and saying it in person with like FaceTime or video chat, like quality time, making sure that even though, because this is a long distance relationship, that we are living in two completely different countries, we make carve out some time to like be able to spend some time with each other online. Physical touch every single time that I go visit him, like even if we're walking on the subway, like we're always trying to hold hands. And so it's something, I think, that has been a beautiful learning that I didn't know was, I guess I figured it was possible, but I didn't think it was realistic. And it's not to say that we're doing these all the time in full throttle, right? But it's just so refreshing to see that people can show each other that they love each other in many different ways, right? As long as they're willing to. And I think one of the biggest struggles that I had, and one of the biggest learnings that I had, and that I was trying to teach with my first relationship, was that love is a verb. you know I think it's very easy for a lot of us, especially when you're in a long-term relationship, to think, oh, I don't have to do things anymore, like I'm comfortable. And it's like, no, you have to be constantly reminding the other person and showing them ways that you still love them and are still loving the person that they are becoming. Because I think one of the points of discussion, I'll say, from my first relationship was, it definitely was brought up, the idea of, oh, you're different from when we met. And I was kind of like, well, what did you expect? I'm not, I wasn't going to stay the same person. I hope nobody stays the same person. I hope we all change. And so the idea of, will you love me through all of my evolutions and appreciate that and want that for me, um kind of came into the picture when I thought about love languages and having those conversations, right? And now I feel like so lucky to be in a place where I found someone who also has that same mentality, right? That same thought of, yeah, we're going to grow, we're going to evolve. Like, you might like this one thing sometimes, like maybe something else will change. But what's not going to change is that I'm going to figure out all of the different ways that I can show you that I love you. And you've also shown me different ways to show me that you love me. And I think I especially am very fresh and have a lot to say about this, because one of the things that we use is some app, um, that asks us, right? Like, one of the interactions is to answer a question every single day. And so that kind of helps expand. And part of those questions that they had that keeps coming back are on love languages. So it's always nice to continue having that conversation, because who knows, like maybe when we first started dating, this was a bigger love language for me, but things have changed, like now we've been in a long distance relationship for a lot longer. Maybe something else has changed. So I think constantly having that touch point and checking in with each other a lot and frequently is also important, because as you change and evolve, as they change and evolve, as your relationship changes and evolves, depending on the environment and all of that stuff, so could your love languages, and what, or depending on which love language you need to be replenished in versus something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to add to Pam's point of, we're talking right now about the ones that we identify with most, but because we're all human, it's fair to say that we express all of these, right?
Mhm.
Like in giving and in receiving. These are just the ones that we find perhaps to be the easiest, right? Because even what Tess was saying, like being able to identify with the fact that she can so naturally give gifts, right? She's still assessing whether or not that's a good or bad thing, but it's still easy to her. But then when you reverse it, it's probably one of the lowest on her list, right? Of receiving gifts, right? Because it's something that doesn't feel easy for her to do. Without taking any words from you, just the expression that uh we still experience all of these from every perspective. And so, like, uh, I may not have spoken on acts of service, But I would say that it's because in the majority of my relationships, I don't feel so naturally to do it. But I think a unique one is my partner, you know? And so I'm trying not to base all of my love languages off of what I do for my partner, because for my partner, it's just so different, you know? And it's like ultimately my partner reminds me of, like, I guess the best things about myself, you know, and that like I'm capable of loving in so many different ways. Um, but it's important to take a step back too and be like, okay, but who am I to everyone in this world? You know, especially like I do live with my partner. So when it comes to quality time, you know, it's like it's a pretty easy, well, it's maybe not easy. I know everybody's in a different situation, but the relationship that I have with my partner is like quality time is definitely one of my biggest I guess in receiving, right? Like I could spend every day and every moment and every minute with that man, you know, and I'll probably annoy the heck out of him, but like for me, I'll never get tired. And so, but I'm not like that with everybody, you know. So like I wouldn't say that it's a love language per se. It's just something that my partner makes me feel, like brings that part out of me. But yeah, so I want to bring it over to Tess again to share the ways that you like to receive love from the list. Curious to know if there is an overlap for you, like one that you do both ways.
Probably overlap from giving, you mean?
No, I'm just curious if there is, because you said that gift giving and quality time were ones you like to give. I was wondering if you might also enjoy receiving quality time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I that was a suspicious yeah, because it was like it's so easy to say like, yes, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah. um I think I think it's kind of natural to also want the languages you give on the receiving category too. Um but you know, it's important because what you just said, Kat, sometimes the categories shift depending on the person, which is a good point, you know. Um I know that there are people that I love that hate physical touch.
Yeah.
And they hate it. They they hate the moment that they have to console you because they're like, "Can you just go to the bathroom and wash your face? Because hugging you, like, it's gonna make me feel awkward." And sometimes they'll do it, and they'll do it, but it just sucks, you know, because they're like, I don't know how to do this. It doesn't feel fulfilling for me, right? Like here, pat pat, you know. So, but I know that that's just, you know, it's not that they can't or don't want to console me. It's like they're like, "Oh, I've seen the movies and you're supposed to do this thing, right?" And it's like, no. But I would say receiving a big one for me is actually physical touch too. Um, and I would also say that I do not really like being touched when I cry, right? I don't enjoy it at all. I actually just like kind of like the little reminders that somebody's there, like, you know, a hand on my back, just something that's like, you know, even someone just takes my hand and they're holding it. Like I like small reminders like that because I feel like historically emotions kind of take over my body and then there's just this storm like going on in my head so nothing feels stabilized. So when someone's just trying to overwhelm me with like a hug, I'm like, ah. So I'm in that corner of like subtle physical touch, please.
The
Does this
balance.
go for everyone?
Yeah,
Interesting.
it really does.
Interesting.
Yeah. I feel uh I feel like, you know, crying and well, getting upset, I feel like nobody really wants to be hugged when they're upset, like mad. But crying, you're upset and you're crying. It's a very difficult feeling because I feel like I and especially because this is such an exaggerated state of my mind, like being upset and crying, like, you know, okay, you've kind of lost control a little bit because something has overwhelmed you. So it's a very exaggerated state of being. On on any other day where I'm like pretty stabilized too, for the most part anyway. um I think that there's this I want to say like thing that goes on in my brain where I'm always telling myself like, you know, it's rude to touch people, don't do that, they don't want it, right? Um but I'm also trying to also just express that this is my level of comfort, right? And express that it's okay to, kind of try it out, right? Like what you were saying, Kat, like just do it, right? And if it's bad, then they'll give you the stop sign, right?
Mhm.
And thankfully, like, people have, and that's good because there's there's no greater blessing than just, having someone also tell you like, "Oh, I did this because like, that's what I wanted to do for you, but, I'll do better next time." Right? Like that's also a really good gift and also just a really good sign of love languages communicating with each other. But yeah, for the receiving end, physical touch is up there, but my mind does a funny thing where it's like physical touch is always bad. Don't do it. And I don't think it's my religion and I don't think it's my family because my family was very touchy-feely on both sides. And my religion, literally in church, in Catholicism, we are told like kiss your neighbor and bless them. Like, okay. Oh, even that in church, I was like, oh my god, anxiety, anxiety.
Yeah, but maybe because it was so formalized like that in the sacrilege, you're like, but I don't want to kiss a stranger.
Yeah.
But really, it was just like, so here's what happens in the Catholic Church, ladies and gentlemen. There's a part in the section where they're like, God, I don't remember the verse, so I'm sorry. But there's a point in the mass where you're like shake hands with neighbors and share blessings. So literally, you're ready, camp, right?
Mhm.
You're sitting in the village like, God bless you.
Blessings unto you.
That's it. Exact. Thank you. And even that, I was like, ah. I was so like, what if they don't want to do it?
Mhm.
And I'm literally in the moment where the priest is telling everybody, do it. And my mind is still like, but what if they don't want to do it with me?
Yeah. But I think also in the church there are so many people who don't want to do it, and I think it's
Yeah.
you have to recognize that that energy is in the room, so that
Hmm.
when you as a child Tess,
Yeah.
who is the most sensitive to energies that you'll ever be because you're so young,
Yeah.
it's like you felt all of that. You felt that like there were times when you turned and no one wanted to, like the person next to you didn't want to be social,
Yeah.
and so technically you were rejected.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, of course, my first person was always like, grandma, dad. Sometimes I'd hit my brother. But then it'd be like, all right, I finished them.
Yeah.
To the person that I sit next to that I don't know. And sometimes it's like someone who's like, yeah, and they have no problem doing it. And then I'm dreading the moment still. I'm like, oh my God. And by the way, this is not me dreading it because I hate physical touch. This is me dreading it because I have no problem doing it. But what if that other person doesn't want to do it? So I feel like I get so caught up with like, what is happening on that on the other end, right? And it's so funny because you're in a setting where it's so socially acceptable. You're in church, you're supposed to love and have a great time with everybody, and
But
but
I mean, I feel like there's a fine line with church in terms of socially acceptable and you have to do this and you're forced to.
it's both though,
But
honestly.
that's why I feel like the forced part is why you feel uncomfortable. I felt
But
uncomfortable
it's
a
not me
few
being
times.
uncomfortable because I'm not uncomfortable to shake hands and tell someone God bless you. I'm just really hyper aware of like, well, what if that person doesn't want to do it? You know? I'm honestly, I've never been uncomfortable with shaking or hugging somebody. Never. The church did not beat that out of me. Catholicism actually endorsed that. But I think it was such an experience to, and I'm by the way, and I'm using like my mass experience as a funny and simple example because I'm not talking about hugging someone or kissing someone or cuddling. I'm talking about shaking hands. Like even at that point my mind was like, what if the other person doesn't want to do it? you know so which is why to say, regardless of what physical language I like receiving, my head will always kind of be hyper aware of, what is, the correct thing to do for that other person, right? So that's why I feel like my receiving love languages are kind of weak, right? Because I'm so focused on, well, what is the love language that that person wants to do, you know? Which is not a healthy thing to do, by the way. Like, I am vocalizing this because somebody out there maybe feels the same way, and I want to invite you to maybe let go of that stress a little bit. Because I'm working on that too. So let's do it together, right? Yeah. Um, and that's just an honest experience since we're just talking about love languages, right? Like, sure, it could be easy for anybody to say, I summon it and it happens and it's great. And that is also a good experience to share and be empowered with each other. But there's also the hyper aware to a fault category that unfortunately can sit in the same room with each other, and we're all understood here, I hope.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You're bringing things into something that I wonder it might be a um potentially a common theme, because I think that universally sometimes we all move in similar directions and patterns. And the idea of being willing to be more adaptive to what the people that you love would rather have, like when it comes to receiving, like what you give to others. I'm sorry, what you would rather receive from others based on what their strengths are, puts me in this headspace of I've been hearing a lot about identity in my life right now. Not my life personally, but I've been noticing that a lot of people in my life that I experience like on in my daily, right? Not people who I haven't connected with in a long time. So people who I'm in conversation with right now, I'm noticing are really struggling with identity, right? And like have been in this wave of serving onto others, right? And like making others happy because they love them and um they want their joy to kind of fuel them, and tussling with that because at the moment they're in a phase of, have I done too much where I've forgotten what I need, and what I want from others. And so you essentially just said that as well for yourself. So it's yet again like another instance for me where I'm hearing like right now in this season there are a lot of people who are really struggling with what identity uh they are, and so I think it's pretty natural because we're heading into the end of the year. And this is when we start to reflect on our goals, on the things that we set for ourselves, right? Knowingly, unknowingly. I know we all have different relationships with the concept of New Year's resolutions, but we do all move in step with each other, and so there's this natural like ending into beginning of things. So I think we all give ourselves very critical self assessments, and we realize that we might have been skating by, right, for a month, 2 months, a season of just fulfilling needs. And now, as we enter the season of giving and choosing who you need to give unto and who you feel called to give unto, you start to analyze, and like kind of go through relationships one by one and realize I'm a different person with each of these people. And is that something that I like? Is that something that I think is making things easier for me? Or is that something that I think is making things tougher? And maybe it would be easier if I identified, right? Because I've clearly changed, which is why I'm giving different things to different people. And so, hey, now's the time, So we literally just put it out there that we're struggling with the same things right now. And for me personally, my two love languages are completely different in what I like to receive from others as opposed to what I give. And it says a lot about me as a person. It says that like personally for me, I struggle a lot with I recognize that in conversations, mirroring is a sense of connection, and I really struggle with that when I'm in conversation with people. I think that a lot of times I struggle with thinking that sometimes people are just being polite, and so like for me with words of affirmation, it's hard for me to receive words of affirmation because sometimes I feel like somebody thinks that they have to give it to me because I gave it to them, that I've created this like odd relationship with with receiving them, of almost like maybe I need to hear it one more time before I know that this person is genuine in where they're coming from, because I hope that they're not just doing it because they feel like I need it. Like I get that worry, right? So because it gives me a little tinge of anxiety, I'm like, okay, that's definitely not a love language for me, because it's something that I'm still connecting to. It almost brings out like this realization that I'm a little insecure in this area. And so for me, the ones that are the easiest for me to receive are quality time. I think that whenever a friend approaches me saying that they miss me, or that they want to reconnect, or even just when people that I do see all of the time want to do something like out of the ordinary that maybe even caters a little bit more to my life and my side of things, is like, oh my God, like I could cry, like it's the best feeling, and also recognizing as we're all getting older, like we have less time to give, and less time to spend. And when somebody knows about how crazy my hectic schedule is, and is still trying to make time, and probably have to go like back and forth with me around like all of these dates, and then make it seem like they don't have just as hectic of a schedule, is like the biggest display of love to me, because I'm always doing that too, of like assuming like everyone else is just as busy as me. So who am I to reach out, and say like, hey, make time to hang out with me? Like that's genuinely what goes on in my head. But when it comes on the reverse, it's so easy for me to be like, yes, we can do this. I'm so happy you reached out. I can't wait. And of course, the people who I think have been really intentional with that with me, it's easier for me to connect and like say like let's get together, and like I can even say I've initiated it too with other people, but it's only because they opened the door. It's not something that I can just freely give. Like I'm not the one to just freely message people and say, "Hey, we need to get together and make plans." I'm really not. Um but I love when it's the reverse end. I'm very picky about when I have gatherings and invite people over, because I have uh a bunch of things going on in my head that I think are necessary, but yet I expect nothing, when I'm going on to like going and having time with somebody else that they set up. And then I would say that the second one for me is acts of service. So I think that I have such an appreciation for this one because it's so hard for me to do. I think that I am such an independent person, like in my mind, that I just don't know what asking for help looks like. And so for me, the only people that I can say I ask for help today are people who have continually performed acts of service for me, like Pam, like so many times in my life, that they've made it very clear that if I were to need something, they're there, you know and so when it comes to the idea of receiving, I've realized because of that, that it's something that I will always love, and will never have that, like I said, that like sometimes like love languages happen unto you, and there's just like this feeling that feels weird and it feels off and it's a little hard to receive. It's never hard for me to receive an act of service, um, which is interesting considering the fact that I will never ask for help, so like I don't ever feel belittled, or like somebody thinks that I'm not capable. Like for some reason, like it only alleviates stress and really shows me how much that person cares, and allows me to like continue to feel like I can pour into them as a friend and as a member of my community. And I I would say that it's as an adult, like it's something that I realize the difference in those friends who stay. I think at this point, like I'm a very seasonal person, and I think that I have friendships and friend circles that are also that way. And the ones that I notice that remain are the ones who just know what's important to me, and like what I really value at the end of the day. Something really simple for me is my theater, and when I have friends that when I have a show who just go to my show without essentially surprise me at my show, right? Like, if you're listening to my podcast and you're somebody who has ever gone to a show that I'm in or associated with in any way, and you bought a ticket and you showed your little booty up and you didn't message me and you didn't tell me you were going, and you like either sent me a message of you sitting in your seat or like on your way there or afterwards telling me the recap or something, like you have no idea that you have done one of the most like giving acts of service to me that you could ever do just by supporting me in what is like my passion and driving force in life. Like that is the pinnacle of what an act of service looks like to me, because you just get it, and Pam has already accentuated this so much because it is her love language. And like knowing what an act of service is, like it's not about getting me the flowers, or like whatever those ceremonial things are about. It's that you came, like it's that you are here at my show, like it's that you understood the amount of work and hours that I put into something, and that because it is for the public to see, I don't want random strangers to see this. Like, I want my friends to see this and I want my family to see this. I want people who understand me to go and like sit down in that audience and see a reflection of me, and how I like to tell stories. And so again, just one example, of like how it feels to receive something that uh is just what your body craves, like what your soul needs. And acts of service is definitely that. So I love this topic because I think that as we said, it's ever changing. And selfishly, right? We always choose our topics for you, but also for ourselves to kind of like reflect and discover a little new nuggets. And this is so helpful going into the holiday season. Like so helpful for me to understand too. Uh it's important to make time to receive, especially as we enter the holidays, because we focus so much on how we can give, right? And who to give. And we forget that that exact same, like everything you put out comes back to you. And so the amount of things that you're about to give is about to come back to you. And are you going to be present and open to receive it? Like I think of Tess as a great example, and like for our listeners too, to really like heed what she said. I think it was super wise, because if you are the person who is very adaptive in your love languages that you can receive, I think it's a superpower as long as it's like really genuine, because it would also mean that you are like very open to receiving love just in general. You know what I mean? Like you have this joy and um almost like a pure heart, that you can see everyone's intention in what they do. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think that's the goal ultimately, and like understanding love languages is being able to understand people and uh, the ease of access for people. But I also encourage you, to with those people that it doesn't feel right, if it's somebody who you genuinely know that you can speak to, that you love, um, maybe this is the year that you actually have some type of conversation about it, and that it's not serious, that it's just as like lighthearted and easy as our episode, wherein I think all three of us shared some pretty vulnerable truths regarding our love languages, but that can just kind of strengthen your relationship further, because it shouldn't just be our partners and our like number ones that we have these conversations with. We should be able to have these conversations with anybody that feels compelled to express a love language with us, and I think that the sooner we have it, like how impressive that Pam talked about being 2 months into the relationship and having already had so many important conversations about what she values, with her partner. We should be able to have conversations like that. Something else that I'll share, just as since we're on this topic of connection, is a very scary statistic that I saw about the ways that we meet people today versus how we met people 100 years ago. And the primary way that people met partners 100 years ago was through school, through family, or through work. And there's only one today, and it's online. And it's almost 70%. And so, what I think that that says is that we all feel very, very open online, and I think that it's really important to recognize where we're going, because it means that if that's the place that we feel like we can be the most genuine and like truly connect with people, then we have to really start looking at the way that we structure our lives around technology. Because I would say that there are still a lot of people who really struggle with being authentic online, and who really struggle with feeling like they can be 100% themselves. And if that's the way that we're really like trying to connect with each other and like, talking about these love languages, like so many of these things are love languages that like, technically, like, how can physical touch really exist online, right? You have to really, really think about what that looks like if that's a love language to you, and get very specific about how you can meet that need, right? When you recognize that, like, the majority of the people of your life, your relationship with them exists through text messages, or through phone calls, because that's how we live today as a society. Like, it's just who we are. It's what we've evolved to, and it's it's our situation, that we have to make work for ourselves, and it's not about lessening the urges that we have naturally. It's about working with it. And so I say it like it was a sad statistic just to see like how much the world is changing, but I hope that like there it's not hopeless, right? Like there's an answer out of this. It just again requires a lot of attention and requires a lot of detail work, and it's specific to you and your lifestyle and how you can make that and flip that around.
I would also even challenge the authenticity of what we believe we portray ourselves online as, because it's so much easier to say specific comments or portray yourself as a specific way online, and how difficult it is to show up in that persona that you've kind of created for yourself online in person. And then it becomes kind of a question of, is this really who you are? Is this someone who you're wanting to be? Is this someone that you think would be accepted versus your own self? Because I feel like a lot of everything that we see online, right? It's everybody's highlights. And so rarely do we ever see any of, the downfalls or their down days. Not even like, I'm not even talking about anything huge, but let's say somebody's having a bad day, right? Like you rarely see any of that being posted, if any, depending on what you're following.
Feel like if you do, it's that person's brand. Like at this point, the way that we've evolved in technology so far,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the people who are vulnerable, they feel like they have to be vulnerable about everything because they were vulnerable
Right.
one time, because they know that they stand out so much.
Right. And I'm sure it's like a fine balance for them, like how can I keep a level of privacy for myself, because everyone needs that, like you need some things that you keep just for yourself. um and then how do you, because I feel like a lot of the people who try to make that their brand are also trying to break the stigma, right, of, oh, everything is always so great and beautiful, and break away from the lens of capitalist society where it's like, oh, look at this great restaurant, or look at my life, like going to splurge at all of these different places, or seeing, a new trip or this and that. And like and I've heard it in circles, in the community around me, of people who decided to go a different route because they noticed that recently in social media a lot of people were kind of showcasing this event, in their lives, and they didn't want to feel like um another person in the wave. And it's like, and when I heard that, I was like, what does that really matter if it's something that you're genuinely like excited to share with people, so i I think I love that you brought that statistic, because I think it's really important to kind of take a moment to stop and reflect about that, especially considering with how fast technology is currently changing and how fast it will continue to change, because it's not going to stop. um and especially considering how scary technology is going to be able to emulate, right, some humanistic aspects of ourselves. And so it's kind of scary to me. That's, what did you say, 70%?
Yeah, it was like 67%. And something else that I thought was really interesting was that school went from being like about 20% to less than 1%
Wow.
of relationships now come from school, like are rooted in school.
Wow. Yeah, that's terrifying. Because, I mean,
I feel like everybody's first boyfriend or girlfriend is from school.
Yeah, but this is like
Like
the partners that
school
they
sweetheart. Oh, that
stay
they
with.
married. Oh,
Right. So
okay.
it's that idea that like the majority of people
Damn.
are not staying in relationships with the people that they meet in
In
school
school.
or in college.
yeah.
Like
Damn.
they're still pursuing other ones because I get it because online you have so many more options that you're looking at
Yeah.
while you're in school.
Well, I also will say there might be a wave against that, considering, you know, I feel like there's a mentality shift from, you have to be with the first person you meet, versus, no, I need to make sure I know who, like, what it is that I want, and so I have to meet different people, and so the likelihood of that being somebody from your school, is pretty low. um and just the idea, the mental blockage of, I want to make sure it's not somebody from my school, you know I feel like that's a big one. But just the idea that 70%, because I still feel like work, friends, these are avenues where, like, you can talk about shared interests, like, at least if you're working with somebody in your field, depending on what stage in your career you're at, or whatever, what in your job. There's bound to be at least some similarities, right? And especially friends or family, like, there's definitely going to be a lot of similarities there, and the fact that that number is pretty low is a lot to take in. Not to say that online is completely bad, but, I think as a society we need to kind of take a step back and look at that, and understand what relationships we are forming, with people that are online. Because I feel like, I know that, as somebody who games online and has made really good friends online, some friends that I would consider lifelong friends, um, it's definitely an interesting point to be in now with technology and that concept of online relationships, because I know what a bridge technology can be. But with how it's being used now, right? With streamers, with the blow up of influencers and all of that, I see how it is a lot more damaging now, versus when how I grew up with technology and the internet. Now it's almost like it's too much access, like, the other day I went to Target with Tess, and I was telling her I saw this little girl. She looked like maybe she was 8 years old, and every little thing she was, like, recording. She was just getting a coffee from Starbucks. But why was she recording everything? You know?
Vlogger right there.
Just cause they vlogger.
TikToker in
But
about 5 years.
what is she really vlogging? It's
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing important, nothing whatever, and, like, that's where she's choosing to put her focus in.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's where her creative attention is going,
Yeah.
as opposed to just so many other things that could happen from that exact exchange. Like from being motivated to know what's in the coffee, you know, or the creative aisles in Target. Like
The lovable.
she's a kid in Target. Like, why not go to the toy aisle, and be like
Yeah.
exploring, or why not go to the clothing section and be
Yeah.
like understanding what your style looks like and things like that.
Even, I would say, just looking at Starbucks through her own eyes rather through the, like,
Yeah.
her phone, you know.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is the world that we live in. So I think this was a great topic, and really nice to really nice to dive into love languages while also recognizing that the world that we live in today makes it challenging to I think we're always going to have challenges, and it's interesting to acknowledge that we live in the digital age that makes some of these love languages. I'm even curious to know like what are the statistics of people who identify with some of these love languages? I would be curious to know,
Right.
and I would be curious to know if those numbers have changed over time too. The amount of people who enjoy physical touch today compared to maybe 40 years ago. I'd be curious to know if that number's changed because of technology
And gifts.
and gifts. Yeah. And
It's
gifts.
probably increased though, if you think about it, physical touch specifically,
I would hope so.
because I would imagine like 100 years ago, physical touch was like, mm-mm.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Mm-mm.
But I think after that point, right? Like I'd be curious to know how we've shifted from the time of like uh the 1960s, right? And sexual liberation, especially for women, right? Like talking about this freely for the first time.
Hmm.
I'd be curious to know how much the numbers have changed from then until today. You know,
And it's funny
that's what I
you,
would want to hear about.
yeah, because I feel like there's a counterculture to anything big, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's of course in the same period what, like, the domestic wife household mold came to be alive at the same time that women were like
Yes.
sexuality.
Yes.
So that, what more prominent photo of a woman than like those ads.
Yeah, and to know like maybe it's exactly the same that it was then, and we
Yeah.
actually haven't changed at all.
Yeah.
What's changed is our focuses,
Right.
and assuming that we've changed.
Assuming, because of course we just had posters to go off of, right? Like, unfortunately, like, men led those worlds, so men led
Mm-hmm.
images of women, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, we'll never know. We'll never know.
But we're
Yeah.
happy to have you here along for our journey of not knowing. And yeah, I hope that this was a nice entrance into the holiday season and our holiday discussions. We definitely have more ideas down the line, but we wanted to focus on giving for this first episode because one, I think it's important to not ignore the obvious. We always try to cater as specifically as we can to what's going on in the world because we're not trying to pretend to be mind readers here. Like where it's important for us to use energies, and I say that especially now as we're preparing and to finish the episode with our traditional, not traditional, but customary tarot read. But that it's important to kind of center around ourselves too before we get into the season of giving because exactly what we were talking about with being able to know what languages work for you is also understanding what works for the people that you love, and you can't do good unto others without first taking care of yourself. So hope that this was a good reminder of that. Hope you have some takeaways, and let's see what the cards have in store for us today.
Yes. So today I am using these tea infused tarot Rider Waite Smith tarot cards. It's for the look. They're not really infused with tea. But I I don't know. I was really leaning towards this deck. It's a pretty new deck that I got. And I was drawn to them for their simplicity because they use the imagery from the Raider Waite Smith. Um, but it's just black and white, right? Besides the tea stained backdrop. And so today, we had a really good discussion on love languages and discovered a little bit about ourselves throughout the episode as well. And I feel like as I was thinking about what we could ask the cards tonight, one of I feel the most helpful things, and I feel like the question that also kind of came up a lot too as we were talking, is how can we have these conversations, right? Like we've acknowledged and highlighted the importance of uh having a conversation on love languages with not just your partner but with your friends, family, close loved ones, how to have that conversation, but we also acknowledged that it was a difficult one. So I would like to ask the cards, like what are some things that can help us navigate through some of those waters, because it can be, depending on who it is, right? This is a conversation we should have with people we find important with us, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy. And it may even include a conversation with ourselves, as we were kind of talking, and when Kat was mentioning that she needed to be open to receiving as well, it definitely reminded me of a time when I kind of had a realization that as much as I do for my friends, I also need to provide them opportunities to help me out, and give them a chance. And that's like a way of me showing them that I love them. Like if I recognize that they understand the type of person that I am, that I can handle it by myself. So when I am able to ask somebody for help, like, w- I feel like that's the biggest way to show them, like, I trust you. I trust you so much. You know how I am with the things that I do, and I trust you enough to ask you for help, and giving them those opportunities. And I feel like a lot of the times we might be coming from a good place, but you know we need to take that step back, especially with ourselves, and it's not going to be easy. So if there's anything that the cards can have, to help us kind of navigate those conversations with ourselves, with other people, on love languages, even to help us clarify, how can we know? Because we've talked about it, and we're talking as people, in our 30s. We've had some years of experience under our belt. And so we've been able to kind of discern some of that. But I feel like if I think back when I was in high school, or even in my early 20s, that was something that I had to learn. It wasn't very like obvious or simple. So I have one card, but I want to get a few more. Okay. Alrighty. So we have, and just a quick reference. Okay. So the cards that came up were, so the Strength card, the Hanged Man, the Seven of Wands, the Nine of Pentacles, and then the one that kind of came flying out was the Three of Pentacles. And at the bottom of the deck, ooh, okay, we have, I will reference these two. We have the Five of Pentacles and we have the Ten of Swords. So, um, let me start with the Strength card. So the Strength card is a major arcana, and it's pretty much signifies exactly what it says, strength, right? I just want to read what it says here in case some other messages pop up. So the imagery of the Strength card, it shows a woman subduing a savage lion, and she has an infinity symbol over her head. And I mean, I know that here in the description it says savage lion, but when I look at it, the lion almost kind of looks like it's licking her hand. It doesn't
Hmm.
really look that savage. But it's still a lion, it's still a wild animal. And here it says strength obviously represents strength, but a calm, patient, and efficient strength. It indicates a proper use of power, compassion, and persuasion to achieve one's goals. The strength card is counter to the chariot in that power of individual is subtle. It represents quietly influencing others to accomplish one's goals rather than outwardly tackling the challenges. So again, I feel like that aligns a lot with what we were saying in terms of it's it's a fine balance, right? Like it can't just be something that you go full throttle and like the chariot and you tell the person like no, you have to do this my way, or like this is the only way that I can receive it. Um in order for you to have a love language that is going to be effective and evoke change in the relationship that you're trying to find, you have to be able to go about it in a more subdued way, like feeling confident in what you know that it is that you need, but also being very gentle and compassionate with it. And I feel like typical depictions of strength are often, ones that require a lot of muscle, a lot of strength, a lot of bruteness. But there's also a lot of strength in, compassion, in being patient, in being compromising and listening to what somebody else has to say. And so I feel like with the strength card that's here, and even with the infinity symbol, like if you think that you don't need it, it's always going to be there, and it's there for a reason because it is very powerful. And so I feel like we have to lean into that, because that that is the way that this woman is able to technically subdue this savage lion, right? Like she's not forcing it into submission. She's being gentle with it. She's being tender with it. She's probably paying attention to some of um the physical reactions that the lion is giving her, so that she knows which way, to know what to do next. So then following that, we have the hanged man. And here it says the hanged man is hanging upside down from a live tree, gaining a different perspective of the world. He is not suffering, but is rather calm and observant. The hanged man indicates the need to pause, look around, and be willing to surrender to new ideas. So again, I feel like this idea of calmness, right? Like when you have difficult conversations, love languages potentially being one of them, I think the calmness really jumps out to me here, because it's important to remain in an energy and a place where you are calm, because you don't know how the other person might receive it, right? But if you stay and remain calm, that'll counteract their need, or the feeling that they have, that they might feel like they might need to defend themselves, right? So if you stay calm, or you reassure them, and you're patient with them, you let them know, like, I'm not trying to change you, I'm not trying to attack you, I'm just really just trying to understand. And then from once we get to this point of understanding, then we can figure out a way to move forward together. And that strength card being together here with the hanged man, I feel like is a really powerful message to really take that slow step, right? The hanged man doesn't become enlightened overnight. He kind of has to stand there, hanging upside down and just thinking and reflecting on his thoughts. But eventually he's going to get there, like in the image there, it looks like he has rays of light surrounding him, around his head. But he can only get there after he's taken the moment to reflect. And with the strength card, she can only get there and taming the lion once she takes the patience and takes the moment to observe the lion, observe its reactions, to understand, what is something that she should be doing, what is something that she should not be doing, to aggravate it even more. And following the hanged man, we have the seven of wands. And the seven of wands shows a guy who looks like he's trying to fend off, all of these different wands that are at his feet. And here it says, with the public success of the six, competition is inevitable. The card represents the struggle to maintain position. So the card before this, the of wands, it shows somebody who is on a horse, and they're wearing a wreath on their head, and so it's almost like indicating, right, a celebration and end of a battle, and they're kind of parading through the streets. And so the seven of wands that follows after it, I feel like it's kind of sitting here more as a reminder that you don't have to feel like you have to be defensive, you know and the reason that I say that is because the nine of pentacles is there right after, and those two cards came in together. And the nine of pentacles shows a woman. She has a bird kind of like on her arm, and she has these beautiful pentacles that have been flourishing behind her. And here it says the nine is a sign of independence and wealth, perhaps luxury. It encourages enjoying the fruits of one's labor, right? So I feel like it might be our instinct, right, to maybe fight back and feel apprehensive when someone wants to initiate this kind of conversation with us. I mean, even as we were talking in the episode, right, like Tessa's instinct was to worry, like, is this person going to receive this well? Like, I feel like our natural instincts is to um think of all the ways that something can go wrong. But I think it's important to acknowledge that you're in this place for a reason, and it took time to get here, right? Like, you're not just gonna go unless you're trying to like understand somebody and build a partnership with them, or a love relationship. But like, let's say like friends or coworkers or something like that, you're not gonna go from the get-go and be like, these are my love languages. Like, you have to get to know somebody first, and then you have experiences that you share together, and then you build this level of trust, and then now you're like, okay, well, I really care about you as a person, but there are some things that I feel like we could both be doing to better show each other how much we care. And so the Nine of Pentacles comes after all of these other cards before her, where all it is just work, right? It's pentacle energy, it's earth energy, it's the slowest moving energy. And so from the ace to the 10, it's this depiction and this storyline of all the hard work that it took for her to get there, right? It says enjoy the fruits of the labor. That means labor was there. It took a while to get there. um but so it's all things to serve as a reminder that this conversation is needed for good intentions and for the purposes of progressing the relationship further and growing it. So any apprehensions and tensions that you might feel, I think, you know it's important to remember that there is still something good that can come out of it. And the reason that I say that is because the one that came flying out that wanted to make sure it was seen, was the Three of Pentacles. And the three shows three people. They're kind of under an arch, and in the middle there are three pentacles, kind of almost they look like a triforce. And in the book it says the three symbolizes successful teamwork. A group of different people has come together to achieve an early success. So this card usually indicates, right, like teamwork, collaboration, friendships, even at times. And the fact that these are three different people, right? It doesn't matter how different you think you might be with this person. Even if your love languages are different, there's still, though I feel like the theme and the word, or like the biggest takeaway of today, right? Compromise, right? They were able to work together even though they're different people because of compromise. But there's also a warning here with the cards, because we have on the bottom of the deck, I had mentioned the Five of Pentacles and then the Ten of Swords. The Five of Pentacles shows, let me make sure. Okay, so the Five of Pentacles shows two people that, they're out in the winter, it's snowing, one of them has crutches, and they're probably hungry, they're probably cold, and they're trying to find, help. They're probably out there like screaming for help, maybe trying to see like, why is nobody helping us? But they don't even realize that there is a window behind them, that has the lights on, that most likely has somebody in there who can help them out. um and here it says the five is symbolic of financial hardship and feeling isolated. Although it is traumatic, it is only temporary. So I feel like these cards are warning us that, and reminding us, right? If you don't do this, or if you are not willing to either compromise or ask for help or meet that person halfway, in the way that they would need to for the Three of Pentacles, you're gonna end up staying cold. You're gonna end up feeling isolated. You're gonna end up with these strings of thoughts that say like, nobody wants to help me, or nobody wants to like meet me. Or potentially these might even be thoughts that are just all in your head, because we do have the Ten of Swords here. And sword energy is air energy, which is mind energy, right? It's all about the mental. And from the ace to the 10 of swords is a very different story from the pentacles, because as the from the ace to the 10, as we build up with the swords, it becomes a uh, a lot sadder, right? It's the idea that the mind starts overwhelming you, and eventually we get to the point where you hit the 10 of swords, and all of the swords are have fallen completely on this person. He is dead on the floor. All 10 swords are there on his body. And a lot of the times I'm trying to find the section in the book just to make sure that I cover everything. But a lot of the times it can feel like, oh, here it is. It says the 10 indicates a major disaster or betrayal. It warns of using a victim mentality to dwell in past slights. So before the 10 is the 9 of swords, which indicates a lot of mental things in your head that are bothering you. That before that is the 8 of swords, which I believe is, yeah, is a woman who's like surrounded by swords and it looks like she can't get out, but her hands aren't really bound, and it kind of speaks more to like outside influences that are kind of um bothering you, or things that you're carrying. And so both of them combined eventually lead to the 10 of swords, right? Where everything just falls down on this person and that's it. They can't take it anymore and they're at their end. And I think what's kind of jumps out to me here is the idea of it warns of using a victim mentality to dwell in past slights. Because again, these swords throughout from the ace to the 10, they're not real, right? They've been floating in the air. So these are all manifestations of the mind. And that can easily um, be reflected in victim mentality, right? So when you're having this conversation of love languages, try to not come to it from a victimization point, right? Like, oh, like how even I said it this earlier, oh, you're doing this to me, or why aren't you doing this? Do you not love me? Or why do you have to do this to me? Um, you have to understand that relationships take two people, right? And if you're wanting to have this conversation, it's probably because this person isn't horrible. They have you know, if you want to have this conversation, you care about them enough and they've shown you enough to show that they care about you as well. So understand that it's going to come from a place of love, right? Having this hard conversation is showing them and yourself that you love and care for that person. And as long as you're willing to talk to them, be patient about it, right? Understand that you're not just trying to tell me this, or um like either not acknowledge my love languages. Maybe they just are not understanding, maybe they don't know. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of patience to get through a conversation like this, because first you're going to have to understand what is their level of understanding with love languages. Some people might not know, they might have heard it about it on social media or people talk about it, but they don't really understand the intricacies of it, or they might not even be able to label the five love languages, right? So be patient, be kind. Also, take that moment to reflect for yourself, right? Kind of how we did a little bit during this episode. Which ones do really call out to me? Are they actually my own, or are they there because of a different reason? And if they are there for a different reason, do I still feel like it speaks to me? And once you take that moment, I think more importantly with yourself before you go ahead and talk to them about it, um, then once you do approach them, be sure to be gentle, take your time with it, be patient with them, give them some grace, give yourself some grace as well. If this is your first conversation ever about how talking with somebody with love languages, there will be, initial reactions, just like the lion. The lion is here, it shows up. I think it's kind of indicating some of our more primal instincts, right? To feel defensive because the seven of wands is here, but these other cards are also here, right? Strength is here. The Three of Pentacles is here. The Nine of Pentacles is here, which I think is super beautiful because what a better indication of the potential of a blossoming, blooming relationship once you go through this than the Nine of Pentacles. So just keep those things in mind, and I feel like whenever you have that conversation, if you feel that you need that conversation and if you feel that this reading has really called out to you, I think things will be okay. Just make sure that you steer away from that victimization mentality, from feeling like you're the only person that's doing this, that this is the only effort, you're the only one who cares. It very much takes two people, but um I think it's also fair to say that they might not know that this conversation is coming. So be patient with them um, when you do have this conversation. And as long as you understand that, and I feel like as long as they have that understanding that this isn't coming from a combative place, that this is coming from a place to continue growing, I feel like you'll both be able to sit down and compromise and find, a way to meet each other and meet each other's needs, right? And meet each other halfway, the way that they did for the Three of Pentacles. So yeah, that's what they have for us today, this morning.
Thank you so much, Pam. Super encouraging, I think, what the cards had to say for this topic. I think that can maybe be intimidating. That at the end of our episode, we are kind of feeling called to surface the idea of that maybe there are some conversations that need to happen around love languages and, stepping into that person, right? Who says, I am strong enough and confident enough to make my needs known, and that I love myself enough to teach people how to love me, and so I know that that can be tough. I know that that's easier said than done. And so that's why we're here offering the tools that we have, that we use ourselves to help you be guided, right? And how to have the best possible outcome when you go into these conversations. Because I think all three of us can say that we've gone into these conversations and learned things that we were hoping were not going to happen, and that's just the ebb and flow of life and the ebb and flow of relationships. But at the end of the day, relationships can only grow with conversations like these, and unfortunately sometimes growth can end in another way. But you shouldn't look at it as too much of a misfortune, because it's just getting you closer to your people, and closer to the trajectory that you're destined to be on. And so I think with that, I would just like to thank you yet again for tuning in to listening to the words that we have to say, the things that we feel called to share, and yet again, a few more anecdotal stories of our lives and just getting to know us a little bit better. I think that we'll continue to do so, especially now as we get into the holidays. And I guess just, as always, we love your feedback and would love to know how this episode has helped you. If there's a love language that you literally didn't know about, or maybe you finally understood. We had like a small discussion about gifts before we began our episode, because even there was something there that we wanted to clarify before we spoke about it today.
Mm-hmm.
So just the reminder that like we are human too, and we are working through these. And uh sometimes it's always important to show up authentically with who you are and where you're at. And so just a reminder that this is us doing that, and so we are not perfect, but we're trying to just show you the best that we can. We always show up as our best today. And I was wondering if Tess has any closing remarks before we say farewell for the day.
Yeah. And sometimes these topics are hard to come up uh hard to come to with your best self, and that's okay. Um yeah, so we are so inviting of you to tussle with them as we do. And we hope that they unveil something fortunate, for the path you're destined on. So good luck, everybody. It's a hard one. And it's a hard season, so prepárate.
En serio. Yes. So without further ado, we'll see you at the next episode. Go forth, be merry, be well, be broken, be whatever you need to be as you reflect on this episode. But we'll see you at the next one. Bye.
Bye.